elements of a good communication goal?
To my mind, a goal has three parts. It's about information, emotion, and action. That action needs to be very concrete. A lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake of being too generic in their request. It might be something like, I want support. But what does support mean? Does it mean a thumbs up on a social media post? Does it mean signing a check? Does it mean becoming an evangelist? Be specific in the action.
What steps can young entrepreneurs take to reduce anxiety before speaking?
Reframe communicating not as a performance where there's a right way and a wrong way, but as something else you can do better and be less nervous. And I suggest reframing your communication as a conversation.
Welcome. My name is Daniel Gurley, and I'm the president of the Global Young Entrepreneur Society. The Global Young Entrepreneur Society is an international organization that supports exceptional young people in achieving entrepreneurial growth. My guest today is Matt Abrams, lecturer of organizational behavior at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. He teaches two very popular classes on strategic communication and effective virtual presenting. Matt's lecture, Think Fast, Talk Smart, has been viewed over 23 million times, making it the most viewed video on the Stanford GSB YouTube channel. He is the co-founder of Bold Echo Communication Solutions, an industry-leading presentation consulting and coaching practice based in Silicon Valley. He is the author of Speaking Up Without Freaking Out, which is now in its third edition. I'm pleased to welcome Matt Abrams.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Matt, today you teach strategic communication at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. But how did you first get interested in public speaking and presentation skills?
Well, so it dates back, actually, believe it or not, to when I was your age, many, many years ago for me now. I was a freshman in high school, and as part of an English class on the very first day, our teacher asked all of the students to stand up and share what we did during the summer. And with my last name being Abrahams, I went first. And at the end of the class, he came up to me and said, "You're really good at this speaking thing. I need you to go to a speech and debate tournament this coming weekend." Being a freshman, being new to high school, I just did what the teacher told me, and I went in and delivered a speech. Unfortunately, things did not go as well as I had planned. I did a speech on the martial arts, something I was passionate about then, still am passionate about. And I was told to start in a big dramatic way. So I started with a big karate kick. But because I was so nervous, I forgot to put on my special karate pants that have a little more room. So at the beginning of my speech, within the first 10 seconds of a 10-minute speech, I ripped my pants from zipper to belt buckle. And at that moment, I learned just how important the impact of anxiety can be on communication. And from that moment on, I've been fascinated by it. I went to graduate school and did studies on it, and I've written books and coached people for a long, long time on how to become more confident and ultimately more compelling as a communicator. But it all started when I was your age with a pretty embarrassing situation.
Many of us have heard you saying, if you fail to plan, plan to fail. An important part of preparing for a presentation is getting to know your audience. What are the key pieces of information you have to know about your audience when planning for a presentation?
And planning is really important for presentations where you have an opportunity to rehearse and practice. And your audience is absolutely the first place to start. Most people start in the wrong place. They start by saying, here is what I want to say. And I think that's exactly wrong. Instead, you should be saying, what does my audience need to hear? Which requires you to do some reconnaissance, reflection, and research into your audience. So there's several things you should be thinking about. First and foremost, what does the audience know relative to the topic that I'm presenting on? You want to target your message to be appropriate for their knowledge level at first, and then you can scaffold that knowledge as you go. You also need to be thinking about their attitudes. You'll create a very different presentation if the audience is supportive of what you're saying versus agnostic or maybe hesitant. Third, you need to be thinking about resistance. What might cause the audience to disagree or not to act on what you're saying? Is it that it costs too much money, takes too much time, requires too much change? You need to think about these things because you'll structure your message differently depending. And then finally, you should be thinking about what motivates the audience. What questions might they have? because that can inform what you say and the order in which you say it. So we have to start by thinking about our audience. We have to figure out ways to learn about them. Maybe it's researching them online, talking to them in advance, but ultimately we're trying to figure out their knowledge, their attitudes, their potential resistance points, and their motivations and questions.
As young entrepreneurs, we often give pitches to potential clients or investors. So what is your recommendation on how to structure our pitches?
First and foremost, the most precious commodity we have in the world today is attention. And if you're pitching customers, potential investors, they have a lot going on for them. So you really need to capture their attention and very quickly explain why what it is you're pitching makes sense for them and is urgent and important. So I'm a big fan of starting with impact, defining the problem or opportunity quickly, and explaining the value or relevance of your solution to the people that you're discussing. So to me, it all starts with a clear definition of what the problem or opportunity is. You then explain your solution and how it's immediately relevant and the impact it'll have. And then you can articulate your approach or your business model or your plan. But you have to start with the problem or opportunity right away. A lot of people take too much time introducing themselves or their team up front. And I like to say a good pitch is like watching a good action movie. If you think about it, a good action movie always starts with action, and then you see the title and the credits. And that's the way a good pitch should be. Get people immersed, get them involved right away before you introduce yourself, your team, etc.
What are the elements of a good communication goal?
Once you've understood your audience and really thought about who they are and what they need, the next step is to generate a goal. And to my mind, a goal has three parts. It's about information, emotion, and action. In other words, at the end of my pitch or my presentation, what do I want my audience to know? That's the information I want them to have. How do I want them to feel? That's the emotion. Do I want them excited, concerned, fear of missing out, listened to? What is that emotion? And then finally, what is the action? And that action needs to be very concrete. A lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake of being too generic in their request. It might be something like, I want support. But what does support mean? Does it mean a thumbs up on a social media post? Does it mean signing a check? Does it mean becoming an evangelist? Be specific in the action. So a good communication goal, which is based on the audience you're speaking to. So if the audience changes, the goal needs to change. Is all about what do you want them to know? How do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do as a result of your communication?
Information, emotion, and action. Easy to remember, yet very useful. According to multiple studies, one of the biggest fears for many people is public speaking. What steps can young entrepreneurs take to reduce anxiety before speaking?
You are certainly right, Daniel. The fear of public speaking is often reported as the number one fear people have. I'm reminded of a comedian, Jerry Seinfeld's joke that at a funeral, people are so nervous about speaking that they'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And it is hard. And especially when you're young and things are newer to you, it can certainly be debilitating. So when it comes to managing anxiety, you really have to take a two-pronged approach. You have to deal with both symptoms and sources. So if I can, I'll give you some examples of both. So when many of us get nervous, the first thing that happens is our heart starts beating faster, we start breathing more shallow and more quickly, and we might even get a little shaky. Those are all normal and natural responses to threat. And we see speaking in high-stakes situations as threatening. So the single best thing you can do is to take a deep belly breath, the kind of thing you would do if you ever do yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong. And interestingly, it's not the inhalation that matters, it's the exhale. So the advice is to make your exhale twice as long as your inhale. So if you take a slow 3 count in, take a slow 6 count out. This will slow down your autonomic nervous system. It'll also deepen your breathing and slow down your breathing so you can speak at a more normal rate with a voice that sounds more conversational. The next thing you can do is to do big, broad gestures, especially when you start. Those engage big muscles, and by engaging big muscles, what you do is you allow that adrenaline, which is causing the shakes, to dissipate. And finally, if you're like me, one of the things that happens to me when I get nervous is I blush, I turn red, and I perspire. And that's because your core body temperature is going up. It's like you're exercising. So you need to cool yourself down. And a great way to cool yourself down is simply to hold something cold in the palms of your hand. Your hands are thermoregulators for your body. You know this if you've ever had warm tea or coffee in the morning and felt it warm you up. We're just doing the same thing. By holding something cold, we're cooling ourselves down. So those are some things you can do to manage symptoms. And if you manage the symptoms, you yourself begin to feel more confident because you're not showing nervousness. And your audience sees you as more confident because you're not displaying anxiety signs. So in fact, you become more confident because people are treating you that way. Now, the other side of the coin are the sources. These are the things that actually make us nervous. And there are lots and lots of sources. Let me share one with you. Many of us worry that we are not going to do our communication right. We want to do it right. And we bring this mentality from all the other things we do in our lives. You're young, you take tests, you want to get the test right. If you do any sports, you want to perform the sport right. So we bring that notion that there's a right way to communicate and we should do our communication right. But in fact, I've been doing this for a long, long time. There is no right way to communicate. There's certainly better ways and worse ways, but there is no one right way. So if you can reframe communicating not as a performance where there's a right way and a wrong way, but as something else, you can do better and be less nervous. And I suggest reframing your communication as a conversation. If when you're pitching potential customers or funders, Daniel, and you see it more like what you're doing with me, just having a conversation, you will tend to be more relaxed. So managing both symptoms and sources can help reduce that anxiety.
One of the nightmares of every presenter is a difficult audience member. What are the best ways to handle them?
If you've got somebody who's just being obnoxious and challenging you, find value, something of value in what they're saying, and paraphrase the conversation to take back control.
What are the most effective ways of beginning and ending your presentations?
The beginning is all about being concise and clear and engaging up front, and the ending is about being very concise, expressing gratitude, and summarizing what you've said.
Now let's talk about first impressions. Your business website says it takes only 37 seconds to make a first impression. What can young entrepreneurs do to make better first impressions?
So the research is if you actually listen to somebody speak, it takes about 30 seconds, half a minute to form an impression. But if you're just looking at them, how they physically show up, you make impressions within milliseconds. So a few things I would recommend. One, work on your anxiety, because if you show up confident, not overconfident, not arrogant, but if you show up confident, that helps. There's a lot of research to say that people who come off as confident are seen as more competent and credible. Also, make sure that you think about and visualize the interaction before you ever show up, so that when you first show up, you're not surprised. It's a way of desensitizing yourself. I have two teenage boys, slightly older than you are, and one is learning to drive. So what do? We're out on the road practicing driving. Why? So that when he's on his own and he's in situations that he confronts, he'll be more comfortable. So anything you can do to practice and desensitize will help. Third, really think about your appearance. Do you dress professionally? Do you speak in words and language in a lexicon that is professional and expected in the type of interaction? These are the things that you can work on in advance. And if you do that, you'll come off giving the impression that you want people to see of you.
When giving a presentation, if your audience is engaged, it is more likely your message will go through. So how can we create engagement during our presentations?
You're absolutely right. If you can make the topic relevant and make your presentation engaging, your audience is more likely to focus on you and to remember what you say. And engagement to me is really just sustained attention. So there are lots of things you can do. Part of it is what you do with your body and your voice. Varying your voice matters. If I were to speak in a monotone way, that's certainly not engaging. But there are also techniques you can build in. For example, get people doing something. Maybe you show them a demo. Maybe you ask them a question or take a poll. Perhaps you could do something by using an analogy or including words like imagine, what if, picture this. That kind of language actually engages people much better than just using bullet points on a slide. And speaking of slides, to be engaging, use slides that have images, not just words and bullet points. So there are many things you can do to enliven a presentation. Think about it. So it's not just creating the content, it's also thinking about how can I pull my audience in and take them on a journey. I like to say your job as a communicator is to be a tour guide, and think about what tour guides do to engage their audience. They get them involved, they ask them questions, they show them interesting things, they vary their voice. All of those are tools that will help you be engaging in your communication.
One of the nightmares of every presenter is a difficult audience member. So how can we prepare for that? And what are the best ways to handle them?
That's true. Having a difficult audience member can be very, very challenging. And that difficult member can do lots of things. They can disagree with what you're saying. They can object. They could ignore you. There are lots of challenges. So I'm a big fan of preparation, and think about what are some of the things that somebody could do that would really be off-putting to you. And then how would you respond? So for example, if you have somebody you're speaking to and they're just not paying attention, they're distracted, they're ignoring you, what could you do? Well, have a couple questions that you could ask the person about what you're talking about. So if you have an offering, a service, a product that you could that the person could use or could have impact on their life, ask them. So imagine you're selling a product that is health or nutrition based. You could ask the person. You could say, have you ever had a day where you just didn't feel good, or you didn't have the energy you wanted? Well, here's a product that can help. So by asking questions, you can make it relevant and get them involved. If you've got somebody who's just being obnoxious and challenging you, find value, something of value in what they're saying, and paraphrase the conversation to take back control. So if somebody's ranting and raving, you can pick something of value. There might be something. They might be talking about how your approach to solving this problem isn't a good one, and there are all these other ways of doing it. But you could jump in and say, I'm really excited that you're as passionate about this problem as I am, because it's only through passion and commitment that we're going to actually solve the problem. And my approach has us doing this, this, and this. So you acknowledge something that you have in common. You interrupt through paraphrasing. So you reward. You say, hey, your passion is great. And then you take the conversation back. So those are tools to handle challenging situations. And I'll tell you this, if somebody's being challenging to you and you're in a group of other people, some people just don't deal with it. They'll just wait and write it out. The problem is, if you do that, others who are watching are negatively evaluating you, because their expectation is that you're going to handle the challenge. So many of us don't act on the challenge because we don't want to embarrass the person who's being challenging, or we don't want to be seen as rude. But in fact, if you don't do that, you're actually being seen as rude to the people who are watching. So it's incumbent on you, it's your job to respond. And paraphrasing, taking control really can help.
That makes a lot of sense. People remember the beginnings and endings of presentations the most. So what are the most effective ways of beginning and ending your presentations?
Well, I'll tell you a way not to do it, which is to say, hi, my name is, and today I'm going to talk about. That's boring, that's banal. Remember, your whole goal is to get people's attention and explain how what you're saying is relevant to them. So there are lots of things you could do. Ask a question, take a poll, do a demo, show a video. Do something that engages and involves your audience. In terms of wrapping up, you don't have a lot of time. As soon as you signal your ending, people check out. They begin to move on. Think about when you're in school and the teacher is about to wrap up. Where does your mind go? It goes to the next class. It goes to what you're doing next, to packing up your books. The point is, you don't have a lot of time. So I actually think a great way to end a presentation is simply to restate your speaking goal. We talked about that earlier. Know, feel, do. So I recommend people end by simply expressing gratitude. Thank you for your time. I hope you are leaving knowing this, feeling this, and being willing to do this. So it's concise, it's clear, and if you structured your content in line with your goal, then it's a great way to wrap up. So the beginning is all about being concise and clear and engaging up front, and the ending is about being very concise, expressing gratitude, and summarizing what you've said.
What resources would you recommend for young entrepreneurs to check out to improve their communicational abilities besides reading your book, speaking up without freaking out, and watching your Stanford lectures on YouTube?
A few things I would suggest. First and foremost, take advantage of courses offered in your schools, in the local colleges. Take the time to learn. I'm a big fan of Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a great organization. I have a website that I curate. It's called nofreakingspeaking.com. A lot of my resources and that of others. I host a podcast for Stanford's Graduate School of Business called Think Fast, Talk Smart. It's named after that video you first saw. And all it is about communication. I interview experts on the Stanford campus about communication, and could be a really good resource. And then finally, as you grow up, as you work on your entrepreneurial endeavors, consider coaching. And coaching firms like mine, Bold Echo, can be very helpful. So take the time to continue. Every single investor, every single business professional is going to tell you that building communication skills is going to help you in all of your work and personal endeavors. So take the time to invest in your communication skills.
We have come to the end of today's discussion, which I found very useful and enjoyable. On behalf of the Global Young Entrepreneur Society, Matt Abrams, thank you very much for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing.